Good afternoon, everybody. Today we're talking about opportunities awaiting in Africa in the cannabis landscape. I have two great guests joining us today. One is Pierre van der Hoven and the other is Garth Strachan, both individuals with extensive experience and knowledge in what is happening and what is the potential for Africa. And this morning we'll have a concentration really on the Southern African region. So thank you, gentlemen, for joining me this morning where I am in Colorado, and this afternoon where you are, Pierre, in Johannesburg. And Garth, where are you today?
I'm also in Johannesburg.
Great. Well, I'm glad that we only had to work out 2 time zones then to make this all happen. Pierre, would you mind sort of telling our members a little bit about your background and experience, both in the space and prior to getting into the cannabis market?
All right. Yeah, Chris, great to be here. And hello to everybody around the world whenever you see this. Yeah, thanks for the invitation. Yeah, I come out of the media industry. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I started one of the biggest radio stations in South Africa and the only private commercial free-to-air television channel. And I've been working extensively in the media industry for many years. A couple of years ago, I grew up in a part of the coast which is known as the Dagga Belt, which is the cannabis belt, where a lot of very well-known strains, including Durban poison, originate from, and that's on the coast of South Africa, and was exposed to cannabis, yeah, from a very young age. And I've been watching the opportunity. And then about a couple of years, 3 or 4 years ago, I approached a very senior government official, who is your other guest, called Garth Strachan. And I said, this is an opportunity for our country. We've got a lot of problems in South Africa. And cannabis is an opportunity that I believed at that time, and so did Garth, he bought into it, is an unrivaled opportunity because of the climate. And then got into the cannabis industry. I did a little bit of consulting work, and we're now setting up cultivation operations in a city called East London, which is again on the coast. And we do a lot of work in terms of industry associations and trying to assist government and unite the private sector. And in that context, I work very closely with Garth. So my history in cannabis goes back a few years, but I'm now operating full-time in this industry.
Great. And Garth, how about yourself? I mean, we got a little bit more there from the introduction, but let us know your background.
Yes, thanks very much. I suppose my background might be a little bit too colorful to go into all the detail, but for the last 10 years...
Perhaps we'll have to schedule a happy hour someday for that.
Yeah. For the last 10 or so years, I have been the Deputy Director General in the South African government responsible for industrial development, which includes agro-processing. For the last 7 months or so, I left government and have been working more or less full-time in the hemp and cannabis industry, working with the private sector, with communities and with government to try and secure, and we are far down the road now, an agreement which puts in place an appropriate policy, regulatory, legislative environment which will secure investment and job creation in the sunrise sector, where, as Pierre has said, South Africa enjoys certain comparative advantages, let me put it that way, and has an enormous need to address unemployment, rural poverty. And so the hemp and cannabis sector represents an enormous opportunity for the country, which together with Pierre and working, as I say, with government and the private sector, we're trying to ensure that as rapid and as optimal a process is put in place to secure the necessary growth for the sector.
That seems to be a pretty, well, first, thank you for that introduction. And I'll tell you where it took my mind. I had a conversation yesterday with one of our members about the notion of impact investing, right? So the idea that we are investing not only for profit, but also for societal benefit. And cannabis and hemp in particular seems well positioned, I think, to do that around the world, both from the health aspects as well as in the industrial hemp sector, a whole lot for employment and sustainable construction and building and all of these different things. Especially over the last year, I think the attraction of capital has been a challenge because people are not only feeling as though there's this speculative nature in the industry overall, but we also have the challenge of a pandemic, which has brought a lot of commerce to a turtle's pace. So I guess I would ask you both, in your region, how are you talking to people about investing in the cannabis and hemp marketplace, not only for the short term, but for the long haul? What is the hook and the opportunity that you're talking to people about?
All right, I'll give that a go. Yeah, COVID has been devastating for our country, but like everything in Africa, there's always a twist in the tail. There's an other side to the story. So while it's been devastating in terms of job losses and economic suffering, relatively speaking, the health impact has been not as bad as would have been expected. It has highlighted the need for a rethink about certain economic development opportunities, and the government's gone out to the international community and raised a lot of money. So ironically, the outcome of COVID may just be the shot in the arm that the industry needs. It's pushed some reforms. Recently, the government announced virtually giving away 700,000 hectares to black farmers as a program of land distribution. Garth and I were in Cape Town yesterday talking to the Black Farmers Association. So while COVID has really been a devastating event, similar to all over the world, the outcome may just be a speeding up of development. Agriculture is seen as a growth sector, and obviously cannabis is if you take away all the politics and history, it's a high value cash crop. Yeah. So ironically, we may look back and say COVID was exactly the boost that the industry needed. Garth, you want to elaborate a bit on that?
Sure. Thanks, Chris and Pierre. South Africa is interesting because it has stark contrasts. On the one hand, a sophisticated, diversified economy with very significant infrastructure and services, a mature banking and investment sector, and very mature industries, which one would describe as sunset or mature sectors like automotives, clothing and textile, and so on and so forth. And on the other hand, the society is characterized by massive unemployment and poverty and lack of economic activity in rural areas. And so we've done a great deal of work to suggest to government and the private sector and communities that the hemp and cannabis sunrise sector, if we put an appropriate policy and legislative and investment-friendly framework in place, this sector can secure enormous benefits in terms of employment, investment, exports, and addressing rural poverty. And we think that we've gone a very long way to convincing the public and the private sector that this is a very important sector, that industrial hemp is an alternative for plastics and the enormous environmental damage that has resulted from the abuse of plastics, and that the cannabis, CBD, CBG, and all the derivatives has enormous potential in the health products and related sectors. And so we're approaching this as a value chain. Parts of the value chain upstream in agriculture, equipment, suppliers, seeds, and so on and so forth exist. And other parts of the value chain is immature and infant. And so this is a huge opportunity for South Africa. And we are convinced that South Africa will grasp this opportunity, but it's complex because there are a host of cultural, religious, economic, and other complexities, which mean that one has to do the hard yards to educate people and to get a shift in thinking across the society about all the benefits that this sector will bring.